Welcome to Cory's Stories. Are you ready to meditate with Cory? Hi friends, make sure that you subscribe and you like this video, and also press the bell because the bell will let you know when a new video comes out. If you love Heidi, Cherry and VAYA, make sure that you go to the link below and you join the Patreon group. Then you'll be part of the Cat Club and you'll get 3 exclusive stories every month for just $7 a month. I hope you enjoy the meditation. I love you. Bye. Are you ready to meditate with Cory? Go ahead and lie down in your bed. Make sure you're all snuggly and warm underneath your blankets. It's time to let your body relax. Maybe even possibly it's time to fall to sleep. In a faraway place, in the middle of nowhere, there was a forest that was full of trees. Amongst those trees, down on the ground, in a very quiet place, there was an acorn house for a fairy that was very, very small. The birds were talking to each other outside. The air was fresh and clean, and it felt very, very cold. The tiniest of fairies pushed open the front door. She heaved and she hoed and she pushed and she pushed. And little by little, the tiny little door on her acorn house opened to a world of white. "Oh my," said the fairy. Oh my was right. The snow had fallen from the sky all night long. And in her world, down on the ground, amongst all of the tall trees all around, all she could see was white. To the fairy's dismay, she had never seen before so much whiteness all around her. The little fingers touched the corner of one single snowflake, and she realized it was cold. She shivered, and as she blew out her breath, it froze there in front of her face. "Oh my, what to do?" she thought to herself. She walked over to her tiny little stove and lit a fire under a pot of water. making herself a cup of tea as she thought and pondered over what to do with so much snow. The fairy knew that cold and warm mixed into something in the middle. Maybe she could pour hot water on the cold snow, and that way she could get out of her house. Teapot after teapot, boil after boil, back and forth she walked, over to the door, over to the snow, and melted it bit by bit. Eventually, she could fly out. She flew through the top of the snow, the tiny bit that was laid on top like a crust, pushing her way through with her hands first, until she was finally free. The first thing she did was gasp. She'd never seen the forest look so beautiful. Everything was covered in white. The trees, the ground, everything all around was white as snow. The little wings flapped in the cool, crisp air, and her nose went instantly pink. She pulled down her flower hat as close over her ears as possible, and as she pulled down her hat, her whole body shivered all the way through. But this tickled and made her smile. A big wave of joy came over the fairy. "Oh, to be in such a beautiful place," she said out loud as she flew and span and twirled around. Snowdrops were falling from the sky. And the snowdrops, even though they were so tiny to the human eye, were big to the tiny little fairy. And she dodged them and flew in between them as if it was a game for a while. And then finally, she got tired and landed on one of the snowflakes. It was like a giant magic carpet underneath her body, and as the wind blew and took her through the trees, she squealed in her tiny little fairy voice, squealing with joy. It was fun. She'd never seen the forest from this way before. She was being blown from east to west and north to south, up and then down, through the branches of the trees, around and under and over. Eventually, the snowflake melted and her tiny body fell through, only to be caught by another snowflake just below. She realized she could jump from snowflake to snowflake, as if she was jumping on the clouds in the sky. each one so pretty and different. She would jump and then jump and then jump and then jump, until finally there was no more jumps left in the tired little fairy. One of the snowflakes drifted back and forth and carried her all the way down to the ground. One of her friends, a squirrel, was there, digging through the snow trying to find nuts. "Oh my," she said to the squirrel. The squirrel just laughed at her and smiled. "Don't stay out for too long, little friend. You'll catch your death." By now, the tiny little fairy's nose was bright red, her cheeks exactly the same. But because she'd been jumping so much, she was all warm inside. She didn't think she would catch her death. More like catch something fun to do next. She giggled and smiled and asked if she could have a ride. The squirrel, very gentlemanly, nodded and sighed. "Of course, my little friend, climb on board." The squirrel leaned his head down to the ground, and the tiny fairy climbed up on his back and held on to his fur, and he was off like a rocket, running as fast as he could. He was hunting down nuts. It was very important. He was hungry. It was breakfast time. He ran from tree to tree, carrying the tiny little fairy on his back. She was enjoying the ride, and he was nice and warm. From tree to tree he hopped and jumped and ran as fast as he could, collecting one nut, then two, then three, then four, and his cheeks got bigger and bigger and bigger. Then 5, then 6. The little tiny fairy said, "Oh my!" Then 7. 7 nuts the squirrel had in its mouth. "Oh my, he's right." Finally, it was time to jump off of the squirrel. The squirrel mumbled goodbye through all of the nuts and was off in the woods just like that. Something on a tree caught the fairy's eye. She flapped her wings and started to fly higher and higher up to the sky. It was a piece of foil that a bird had collected and placed in its nest. The foil had caught the sunshine, and it twinkled and shone like a light. And when she got there and she looked in the nest, there were so many treasures. String, fluff, feathers, and foil, along with a screw. a bottle cap top. And the weirdest thing of all, a tiny little doll shoe, plastic and bright red. She wondered to herself, "Oh my! Why would the bird collect such strange things?" And as if by magic, the bird landed there on the side of its nest and looked down at the fairy inside and said, "Hello, my little friend. What are you doing here?" The fairy explained about the light that caught her eye. It twinkled from the sun and shined really bright. The bird said, "Oh yes, anything twinkly is always just right when it comes to making a nest. Have you had your breakfast yet?" The fairy looked puzzled, but then she realized her tiny, tiny little tummy was gurgling away, talking as if to say, "It's breakfast time." She looked up at the bird and said, "Oh my!" It was time to fly home, to go back to her acorn house, to eat a warm piece of pie from the oven. That would be just a pure delight. She said goodbye to the bird. He offered her a worm. She refused and said, "Oh my." And she flew and dodged the big giant snowflakes that were falling all over from the sky. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes went by, and she finally got home. She flew through the snow in the tunnel that she'd made, all the way back to her front door. She closed the door and shivered. She searched through her drawers and put on a big pair of fluffy socks, a fluffy cardigan, fluffy pants, and fluffy scarf. Now that she'd stopped flying and jumping and bouncing and riding on the squirrel, oh, she was cold. "Oh my," she said. She warmed up her pie and sipped on hot chocolate. Sitting by the stove, she stared out of her tiny little window that was just white as snow. And after a while, she decided to climb back into her bed, to close out the light. She pulled the covers over her head, and she dreamed of spring and flowers and rain and sunshine and daffodils and tulips She dreamed and dreamed and dreamed. She dreamed a wintry day away. The end.